At 22, Tyler Morgan sat before his laptop and clicked open his first brokerage account. He expected a structured, logical process. He expected charts, data, and measured steps. Instead, he opened a digital hurricane. His screen flickered with red and green flashes. Urgent alerts stacked up in the corner like a rising tide. One tab screamed about an impending market collapse. Another window blasted a notification from an influencer promising overnight wealth. A third alert insisted he had to move his capital within the hour. The noise was constant. It was aggressive. It pulled his eyes from one corner of the screen to the other, making it impossible to focus on a single ticker. Every notification demanded immediate attention, creating a rhythm of panic that felt like a physical pulse. He tried to scroll, but the feed refreshed, burying his progress under a fresh layer of hype and alarm. The calm he had anticipated was gone, replaced by a frantic, screaming stream of information that seemed to know exactly how to trigger his fear. He was not looking at a market. He was looking at a war for his attention, and he was losing from the very first click. Tyler began by following the loudest voices in the feed. He bought a trending stock because the notification insisted it was the next breakout. He watched the screen for 72 hours, his pulse matching the flickering price action. When a headline predicted a total crash, he sold everything. He did not analyze the fundamentals. He reacted to the fear. Then, he found a forum where a stranger promised that a specific crypto coin was the next big thing. Tyler moved his remaining capital into the volatile asset. He refreshed the page every 5 minutes, watching the numbers climb and fall like a heartbeat. He bought more when it surged, then panicked and sold when it dipped. He was moving constantly. He was clicking, trading, and tracking every movement with absolute dedication. Yet, when he checked his account balance at the end of each week, the total remained stubbornly stuck at zero. The gains were canceled out by the fees and the poor timing. He was burning his energy to stay in the exact same place. The more he chased the market, the further he drifted from actual progress, trapped in a cycle of motion that yielded nothing but exhaustion. A year had passed since that first click. Tyler sat down to review his annual statement. Expecting to see the fruit of his restless labor, he expected growth. He expected a reward for the thousands of minutes spent tracking the screen. He pulled the document from the printer and let his eyes scan the rows of data. The numbers were not black, they were red. Every entry or he told a story of loss, poor timing, and wasted potential. He stared at the total. It was lower than the day he started. The silence in the room felt heavy, pressing against his ears. He tried to find a reason, a hidden variable or a market error, but the math was indifferent to his confusion. He had been so busy listening to the shout of the crowd that he had forgotten to listen to his own logic. He had not been investing. He had been borrowing opinions from loud strangers who cared nothing for his future. He looked at the screen, then at the paper, and finally understood the trap. He was renting his convictions, and the rent was his capital. The realization was sharp, cold, and final. He had been playing someone else's game, and he had been losing every single time. Tyler pushed the statement aside. The red numbers seemed to burn into his vision, a stark reminder of his past year. He stood up, paced the small room, and stopped at his bookshelf. He pulled out a worn copy of Napoleon Hill. He sat on the floor, the light from the window catching the pages, and began to read. One sentence stopped him. He read it once, then twice, letting the words settle. Successful people develop the ability to think independently. He looked at his laptop, still pulsing with notifications, and saw it for the first time as a source of interference rather than information. He had been renting his convictions, borrowing the confidence of people he did not know. He closed the book and set it on his desk. The room felt different, quieter. He realized he had been waiting for permission to succeed, waiting for a signal from the crowd that never came. He stood up, walked to the laptop, and clicked the browser shut. The screen went dark. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his own agency for the first time. He would no longer trade his future for the opinions of strangers. He would build his own path, one independent decision at a time. Tyler began his new life with a simple, brutal purge. He opened his phone, held his thumb over the social media icons, and deleted them one by one. The constant stream of market alarms ceased. The screen was empty. He turned to the letters of Warren Buffett, reading the same pages until the advice became his own. He stopped chasing spikes and started buying shares in established, profitable companies. It felt agonizingly slow. While his friends gathered to compare returns on volatile trades, Tyler sat in his chair and watched the numbers move in increments, not leaps. He felt the pull of the old habits every time his phone remained dark. He saw his friends boast about triple-digit gains, their voices rising with excitement, and felt the sharp sting of missing out. The temptation to jump back into the chaos was a physical weight in his chest. He stayed in his seat. He kept his focus on the long horizon. He learned to endure the boredom of stability, knowing that patience was the price of a different result. He was no longer a participant in the frantic race, and the silence he had cultivated began to feel less like an absence and more like a foundation. The test arrived on a Tuesday. A friend burst into the room, phone shoved toward Tyler's face, screen glowing with a ticker symbol that had tripled in price overnight. He was breathless, eyes wide with the adrenaline of the chase. "You have to get in now, Tyler. It is going to double again by Friday. Everyone is buying." Tyler looked at the screen, then at his friend's frantic expression. He did not reach for his laptop. He did not pull out his phone. He kept his hands deep in his pockets, anchoring himself against the urge to follow the momentum. He waited until the silence in the room became heavy. Then, he asked, "What happens if you are wrong?" The friend blinked, the excitement stuttering on his face. He opened his mouth to recite a talking point, but the words failed him. There was no plan for a crash, no logic behind the hype, only the desperate need to not be left behind. The friend looked away, finally seeing the void behind his own advice. Tyler remained still, his focus unshaken. In that moment, he felt the internal shift solidify. He had traded the anxiety of the crowd for the cold, clear power of his own discipline. He had won the argument without saying a word, and for the first time, he knew he was truly in control. Years blurred into a decade. Outside his office, the world moved in violent, predictable patterns. Markets surged, hitting record highs before crashing into deep red valleys. He watched the cycles from his desk, a detached observer of the chaos. Influencers who had once dominated the headlines cycled through their own brief. Frantic seasons of fame, their voices growing louder as their influence inevitably withered into obscurity. One by one, the faces on the screens changed, yet the message remained the same. Buy now, panic later, follow the herd. Tyler did not participate. He kept his strategy static, his portfolio anchored to quality, and his focus guarded like a vault. He did not check the daily fluctuations or react to the frantic news cycles that broke his peers. He treated his attention as a finite resource, refusing to spend it on the opinions of strangers who would be forgotten within a year. While the world outside shouted and scrambled for the next quick gain, he remained motionless, his discipline unshaken. He sat through the booms and the busts, his routine unchanged, his portfolio growing in the quiet spaces between the headlines. He was no longer trying to beat the market. He was simply outlasting the noise. The office was quiet. The only sound was the rhythmic hum of the ventilation and the distant, muffled traffic from the street below. Tyler sat in his chair, the leather creaking slightly as he leaned forward toward the center of his monitor. His mouse hovered over the refresh icon. He did not rush. He waited until the afternoon light had shifted across his desk, marking the end of another workday. He clicked. The screen flickered, the browser loading the updated statement with a mechanical, predictable speed. The numbers shifted, digits sliding into place until they held steady. $1 million. He stared at the figure. There was no fanfare, no flashing lights, no celebratory notification, just the clean, black text printed against a white background. He looked at his hands, steady and relaxed, then back at the screen. He traced the line of the total with his fingertip. It was a simple, mathematical certainty, the result of years spent ignoring the siren calls of the market. He closed the browser window. He shut the laptop lid, the click of the latch echoing in the small room. The goal was reached. He stood up, pushed his chair in, and walked toward the window to watch the city move, knowing that for the first time, he was the one not running. A younger acquaintance knocked on the doorframe, his gaze darting toward Tyler's open laptop. He held a phone, his thumb hovering over a trading app as if waiting for a signal. "I saw the reports," the man said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "What is the next big play? Give me a name." Tyler did not look at the screen. He turned his chair to face the man directly. He did not smile. "The greatest advantage you can have is thinking for yourself," Tyler said, his voice level. The man blinked, his brow furrowing as he waited for a ticker symbol that never came. He looked down at his own screen, then back at Tyler, his face tightening with frustration. "But everyone is buying this," he insisted, holding up his phone like evidence. Tyler stood up, his movements deliberate. "The crowd is useful for data, but it is dangerous for decisions." The man stood frozen, the silence in the room stretching between them. He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came. He looked at Tyler's empty desk, then at his own glowing, chaotic screen. He backed away, his movements jerky, the certainty he had walked in with replaced by a hollow, unsettled look. He did not ask again. The office door clicked shut, leaving Tyler in the vacuum of his own quiet. He sat back down and looked at the black surface of his closed laptop. Outside, the city continued its frantic pace, sirens wailing and traffic grinding against the pavement. But inside, the air was still. He traced the edge of the desk with his palm. 10 years, the world had shouted for his attention. Influencers had promised secrets. Forums had demanded instant hand. He had watched them rise and fall, cycles of noise that left nothing behind but dust. He had chosen the path of the void. He had guarded his focus like a vault. Denying every urge to follow the herd, he stood and walked to the window, watching the shadows stretch across the floorboards. He was not lucky. Luck was the currency of the crowd. He was disciplined. He had won by refusing to engage, by staying silent while the rest of the world screamed its opinions into the wind. He gripped the window frame, feeling the solid, unmoving structure beneath his hands. The work was finished. The noise had been locked outside. He remained here, in the center of the silence, and finally, he understood the value of every single day he had spent alone.